Democratic Party favorability is at its lowest point in 3 decades, according to this data that Sosnick has collated here. And if we move on to the next one, this is where I think this gets really, really interesting, because that first one was with the whole, that's with everybody, left and right. Democrats now, their voters have a low opinion of their own party. But if you look at this chart, and I'll explain it again for people who are joining us on the podcast version, Democrats are almost at Tea Party levels. So the low point for Republicans in the last 20 or so years is in 2009 of dissatisfaction with, or the favorability with their own party. So Republicans had the low point of favorability for their own party in 2009, which makes sense. It's when the Tea Party kicks off. Democrats are approaching that level of low favorability rating of their own party, Tim. And that is very new for Democrats. You've talked to Zohran Mamdani. You've talked to politicians who are hesitant about voting or endorsing Zohran Mamdani, probably voting for him too. We'll get to the Hakeem Jeffries interview more in a second, but have they realized exactly what they're in for? Because you lived through the Tea Party years in Washington, D.C., and you talk to a lot of Democrats now. My take on this is they have no idea what a whirlwind they're about to reap.
I mean, they're aware that it's bad. I guess I'd say this. Awareness is the first step towards recovery. That's the problem. Are they? But like the level of awareness is not high enough. I guess I would put it like that. So at least they're having some conversations about it. In some ways, I think that there are some parallels to the Tea Party element about just how the voters are just rabid and desperate for somebody that's a fighter and represents them, and they feel unrepresented kind of by the last few nominees. It's not like they didn't like Kamala Biden or Hillary, but in some ways that lineup is not so dissimilar from like McCain and Romney to the Republicans, right? Just in the sense that like, okay, we were fine to vote for them, but we didn't get what we wanted, really, right? And we didn't get things that like something that we were really passionate about. And so I think that is there for sure. I think the Democrats needing to be more responsive to their base's views on certain issues, like one we were just talking about, is definitely part of it. One potential difference, though, is the Democrats' coalition is more diverse. And I don't really necessarily even mean that just like by skin color, but I just mean like old black voters, young black voters are kind of different. They're they got these new suburban, former Republican types we're talking about that like make up a decent amount of the primary electorate. You got old liberals. Like it's kind of diffuse, right? Like, and the groups are kind of unhappy with the party for different reasons, right? Like the lefties are unhappy that the neoliberals have been in charge, and the neoliberals are unhappy that the neoliberals have been too big of.
I can't believe you just used the word neoliberal.
Yeah, sorry.
Like a slur. We have to bleep it out.
Give people shorthand, So anyway, they're all kind of mad for different reasons. Where like the Republican base is pretty homogenous. And they were like all mad for the same reasons, basically, which we could get into. And so I think, a lot easier for like Tea Party insurgents to galvanize a majority and overthrow candidates. I'm like a little bit skeptical that we'll see the same exact thing like on the left, that there'll be like a whole group of Zohrans like overthrowing Democrats all over the country. I that could happen in a few places. Like I'm not saying there's a zero, but. They haven't had their. I guess wake me up if they have their Eric Cantor moment for the OGs. You'll remember that. So,
wasn't that AOC though?
Was that AOC? I don't really think so. Joe Crowley didn't count as Eric Cantor. Would be like if Hakeem got over and Eric Cantor was the minority whip, and he was the number 2 person in the House, and he got overthrown by like a no-name teacher, Dave Bratt, who was a kind of kook, frankly. And so, if that happens, okay. But I think that the Democratic coalition is different in some ways meaningfully from the Republican coalition. It makes it a little bit harder for like an insurgent left to overthrow the party.
I should have warned you about this, and we will not countenance Dave Bratt slander on this show. That is our number 1 rule.
I apologize. I said kind of a kook, and you could read that as a compliment if depending on how you look at it.
That's well said. On that point, I talked to one of the Texas Democrats who fled to in an attempt to prevent the redistricting in that state. And one of the things she told me is that she gets along, well, even though she's totally philosophically different with whatever the Texas State Freedom Caucus is. I think it's actually called the Freedom Caucus, but because they agree on this one question, which is that the system is fundamentally broken, that our institutions are broken. And when I asked her if this felt like a Tea Party movement, she was like enthusiastic. And she said, absolutely yes, and went on to explain it's because there's this shared perspective on the institution itself being broken. But now that I think of what you just said, I'm also looking at the graphic we had up on the screen from the Sosnick memo about education level. And when I think about that, it makes me wonder if, you see low institutional trust, my instinct, and I think this is true in the data, but I'd have to go double check, is lowest among the working class.
Right.
And that is, when you combine that with education level for Dem voters right now, switching, becoming the party of the more affluent, it does make me think that might be a completely different state in terms of like whether you have a rabble-rousing movement that is able to capture a lot of energy and momentum overthrowing Dems if you now have the Bulwark podcast listeners who are in your coalition.
Just like picture in your head the Bulwark podcast listeners are not exactly everything is broken type people. Maybe some right. of them. We have different types of folks who listen for different reasons, but like the core audience. Like just imagine in your head the stereotypical No Kings protester, who's watching MSNBC or whatever, and then imagine in your head like the stereotypical like lefty populist person like showing up for whatever, a Bernie event. Like, is that like they're both mad at the Democratic Party, right? But are they going to join together to support? Who are they going to join together to support to overthrow the existing establishment, right? Like, it's a little bit more complicated, and I think I think that part of that is for that reason you're saying. Like, there's a big part of the coalition that's high trust, high education. And they're not really looking to burn everything down. Like they're looking to burn down the Trump administration, but like they're not looking to burn down every institution, right?
George Conway outside John Bolton's house, like with this phone live streaming. It's like an Andrew Breitbart, the Andrew Breitbart of the center, of the Never Trump Center. Over the years, I have been clear about this. I am not just pro-birth, I am pro-life, and being pro-life means standing with mothers not only before their baby is born, but long after. And that is exactly why I partner very proudly with Preborn. Preborn doesn't just save babies, they make motherhood abundantly possible. They provide free ultrasounds and share the truth of the gospel with women in crisis, and then they stay with real practical help, including financial support for up to 2 years after the baby is born. Incredible. This is what true Christ-centered compassion looks like, not just for the baby, but for the mother too. And here's where you can make a difference, a huge difference. Just $28 provides a free life-saving ultrasound. One chance for a mother to see her baby. And when she does, she is twice as likely to choose life. Amazing. Preborn is trying to save 70,000 babies this year. So don't just say you're pro-life, live it. Help save babies and support mothers today. Go to preborn.com/Emily or call 855-601-2229. That's preborn.com/Emily.